Okay, here we go again. Round two. I hope this audio is picking up good enough. Over here. Whoops. Okay. Back to the list of ways that you can lie with statistics. Number one is sample bias. Figure out a way to ask only people you know agree with you, and then present their opinions as representative of everyone. This is a form of spotlighting. We'll talk about spotlighting a little bit later. And this is the error that the Literary Digest unwittingly committed. Many people since have done the same thing, either accidentally or on purpose. The book also talks about the survey of Yale undergraduates or graduates rather, mentioned in the first chapter. And that's another good example, because you never know if a sample bias is a problem in any survey without knowing its methodology. And, so citations of percentages of Americans who support this or that should never be just simply accepted without question. You have to know how the figure was derived. A traditional telephone poll, 3 to 5 points, kind of probably good for trend watching. The product of one of Nate Silver's algorithms, probably pretty close. Hasty unscientific poll conducted by newspaper staff, pretty much meaningless. Number two, average or median. You can choose between the average and the median if you do that. Most people think they're the same thing. But when Bill Gates is visiting campus, the average income rockets up to about $900,000, while the median income barely moves. Don't quote me on the exact figures. It's probably more than that, actually. I'm just using it to demonstrate the method. Obviously, depending on which point you want to make, either OSU people are rich or OSU people are poor, you can trot out whichever one of those statistics you think will win you the pony. Three, and I should mention too, a lot of times people say, well, the median income is blah, 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 blah. And always it's like a mini red flag. Why aren't you talking about average? When people talk about average, why aren't you talking about median? It isn't necessarily a challenge, just something that you should be aware of. Someone chose one or the other of those. It may be because they've never heard of median and just assumed that average was the thing. But it may also be because, average wouldn't make the point, and median would. For fair reasons or foul. Number three, decontextualize. Okay, I got a demo for this one. What would you think if I told you that the incorporated town of Sumter, Oregon experienced a 2,800% growth in its population from 1979 to 2000? Pretty impressive statistic, huh? Go Sumter. What a story of growth, until you learn that there was one person living in Sumter in 1970. Sumter's population's name was O.T. Ford. Sumter's mayor's name was O.T. Ford, who was also president of the town council. Sumter's dog catcher and police chief were also named O.T. Ford. You get the idea. He liked to joke that Sumter had a Republican administration, and by golly, I guess it did. Once you've noticed this trick, new business reporting will start to drive you nuts. They'll say the Dow is down 143 points and the NASDAQ is off 15, and you're like, well, why do I care about that? Unless you follow those indices very closely and know the context pretty well, it's kind of meaningless. The Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped 125 points in October 1929. It drops by that much and more all the time today, but the difference is the context. The Dow's above 15,000 now, or maybe 16, I don't know. In 1929, though, it was falling from 350. So, yeah. Context. You can also decontextualize percentages to great effect if Vinnie's Cash Advance Store and Liquor Mart is willing to sell you $100 or lend you $100 for 2 weeks for a $10 fee. Their fee for the loan can be described with equal accuracy as 10% or 520%, depending on whether it's annualized. Most people kind of assume the annualized thing. Most people also don't add in fees, especially small ones that are under $10. If you're trying to minimize the rapaciousness of a $10 a 10% a week interest charge, you can get some good mileage out of that assumption. Also, out of the some sort of a trick there's a $1 a week finance charge and a $9 a week convenience fee. You get the idea. Manipulating graphs. Oh, look, I screwed this one up. When I changed the background color, I didn't move the type. But it says manipulating graphs up here, trust me. The most common way to do this is by truncating the y-axis. And you'll see that everywhere. That's what this graphic illustrates, which I took out of the book. Huff covers it in chapter 5 better than I can here, so I'll just refer you to that. But suffice it to say that there's an amazing array of techniques you can use to make a graph look like something it's not, while still remaining technically accurate. If you can probably see this, but on the one, this one, the y-axis is truncated here at it looks like 20 billion or something like that. So instead of starting from 0, it starts from 20 billion. Number 5, find a bullshit statistic and quote it accurately. Yeah, right. A statistic that's not really relevant is kind of useful for this sometimes. Ivory soap, which is famously advertised as being 99.44% pure, but pure what, right? 0.56% concentration of some chemicals is actually a very lethal dose. Fluorine, for elemental fluorine, for example. I really like this commercial as a great, easy to spot example of a bullshit statistic. Let's see if I can get it to play.
We asked over 3,000 doctors to review 5-Hour Energy, and what they said is amazing.
Amazing.
Over 73% who reviewed 5-Hour Energy said they would recommend a low-calorie energy supplement to their healthy patients who use energy supplements. 73%. 5-Hour Energy has 4 calories and is used over 9 million times a week. Is 5-Hour Energy right for you? Ask your doctor. We already asked 3,000.
Okay, that one got kind of savaged on the internet because people couldn't help but notice. The doctors aren't actually saying that you should take the product. They're saying if you have to take the product, maybe don't take one that's loaded with sugar. Okay, yeah. Bullshit statistics. Here's 5.5 is to find a bullshitter and quote him or her accurately, which I kind of referenced at the beginning of this. Remember this tactic later, too, when we talked about Ryan Holiday and his trading up the chain technique. It won't be long. It's about another half a week or so. Week and a half counting this long weekend. So, yeah. Number 6. Demonstrate correlation and then assert causality. Most people will just unquestioningly buy it. Here's a quick demo. Let's say the Kimberly-Clark Company did a survey and found that they sold 100,000 boxes of Depends adult undergarments per year in Corvallis to a population of 50,000 people. So 2 boxes per person per year. But then they found out that only 2,000 of those boxes were sold to OSU students. In other words, on average, OSU students use 1% as many Depends as other Corvallis residents do. Don't quote me on these statistics, I just made them up. But assuming that they're true, or pretending that they're true, therefore, taking classes at OSU provides 99% protection against adult incontinence, right? The data proves it, right? No, of course, in this instance, you can clearly see what's wrong with that thinking. If the average OSU student is 23 years old, and the average Corvallis resident is 49 years old or something like that, right? The difference in Depends consumption stems from not from being an OSU student, but from being young enough to not leak yet, I guess. Anyway, but you can whip together a great-looking bar graph showing how much protection from incontinence problems your status as an OSU student is giving you, and it'll look pretty good. Better than this advertisement from an old Saturday Night Live cartoon or comedy sketch about similar issues. Anyway, number 7, play with the percentages. Now, this one is a little on the nickel-ante side, but it's pretty common. If you get a pay raise from $10 to $15 an hour, now you're making 50% more than you were before your raise, because $10 plus 50% of $10 is $15. Before your raise, you were making 33% less than you are now, because $15 minus 33% of $10 or $15 equals $10. So people mix these two approaches up all the time. Usually they err on whatever side will make their story more dramatic. There's one more, another variety of statisticular homicide that I want to talk about. It's the spherical chicken fallacy. I'm not quite sure if that is a standard term or if it's one that I just borrowed from my physics professor when I was in high school. He may have made it up. Hell, I don't know. But as many pictures of spherical chickens as I've seen on the internet, I'm fairly sure that it wasn't original to Mr. Johnson. Assuming a spherical chicken is the trick, and this is the punchline from Rick Johnson's joke, which I remember from high school, in which a group of physicists is trying to guess how many chickens would fit into a Volkswagen Beetle, and their answer, which followed much head-scratching and calculator tapping, started with those four immortal words. Well, assuming a spherical chicken, you could fit, I don't know how many chickens, but anyway, here's the problem. The idea is to reduce the messy reality of a chicken to a clean mathematical construct that can be used to make calculations. There are several different ways that you can reduce reality to mathematical constructs, though, which will affect the outcome in very important and significant ways. None of them will be particularly accurate. Let's take spherical chicken calculations, for example. If you take the spherical chicken fallacy, what you do is you oversimplify reality so that you can plug it into a math problem. The results can be wildly off the mark, but they still sound super precise and scientific. Take the chicken. Chickens are like, what, 70% feathers by volume? There's a almost naked one and a fluffed up winter night one there. Stuffing a chicken into a Volkswagen would obviously compress some feathers. Does the spherical chicken model account for the compressibility of the feathers? Does it account for the plasticity of the chicken, the fact that your basic chicken can, assuming that it's dead, can be squinched in, so that it will pack together with the other chickens, presumably also dead. Does it account for or does it account or assume rather that the chicken is just like a glass marble? Right? These are just a couple of the ways that you can make the spherical chicken fallacy wildly inaccurate. The point of all this is there's a lot of factors in the world that just can't be calculated with mathematical precision. Even if they can, the results you get from them depend entirely on the quality of your spherical chicken assumptions. So anytime you see, and this is usually when you see a spherical chicken analysis being presented as a basis for policy, it's people, not chickens, that are getting, transformed for the sake of easy calculation into a simple set of numbers. So always be concerned about that, especially if the person or institution doing the calculating has something to gain or lose by the outcome. Also, you will have a sense for problems that are not amenable to mathematical precision. When somebody tells you that 413.43 chickens can be stuffed into the back of this Volkswagen, it's a guarantee that they're spherical chickening. When someone tells you that, the average teenager says it's not fair 7.3 times per minute. Well, I mean, I guess that's something that you could actually calculate. It's just more like, that they didn't. But there are things that you can study in like aggregate form, I guess you could say. But you can't make precise calculations on them because they just won't fit into the analysis. Be aware of that. Joel Stein, by the way, was born in 1971, so a few 1 or 2 years after me. So he's not a boomer, he's not a millennial. But when he starts prattling about millennials, he's the guy that wrote the Time magazine article, the me generation or whatever. When he starts prattling about millennials, that's a spherical chicken. He is reducing people your age to something that he can make yes, no numerical claims about. This is, by the way, is one of Matt Bohr's best cartoons. Matt Bohr's is a millennial and couldn't pass this one up without calling out the generation trolling. Generation trolling is frequently a place for spherical chickening, where you reduce stuff to mathematically crunchable constructs, or to constructs that you can make a judgment on, I guess you could say. I have to say, I'm just going to go back in time a little bit to when I when I earned my master's degree. One of the things that I had to study fairly carefully for that was a historical spherical chicken episode that had fairly substantial ramifications, especially on the 19th century. It was this guy. This is Thomas Malthus. In 1799, he promulgated the following intellectual swindle. Given that the population of humanity increases geometrically, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, etc., and food supply increases mathematically, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc., we're destined to outstrip our food supply. So famine is inevitable and natural, and therefore trying to save people who are starving only enables them to keep reproducing, so that when the famine finally comes, there's more suffering. So it's cruel to be kind. Don't feed the hungry people. Do you see the spherical chicken here? It's at the very front of it. Who says that population increases geometrically? Historically, that claim is provably untrue. It's not easy to see how it increases, but if you could calculate it mathematically, the formula would be so dang complicated that you wouldn't be able to fit it in your brain. It was probably untrue it was provably untrue, though, even when Malthus said it. He adopted it to make the calculation easier. Ditto for food supply increases arithmetically. When the potato was brought over from the New World, the food supply sure didn't increase arithmetically. But again, it took an unpredictable and complex phenomenon and made it simple and extrapolatable. It also misrepresented it so that people would extrapolate it and pretend it was simple. It took the world's chickens and made them spherical. So Malthus built this entire thesis on top of a pair of colossal spherical chicken assumptions, but people believed him because it was convenient for them to believe him, because people in the first world found it less convenient to pretend that the third world didn't need to be fed than to less convenient, more convenient. Well, you kind of get the idea. That people believed him, and millions of Indian and Chinese and Irish people died of starvation because of this claim. So what can you do to statisticulatorize proof yourself? Here's the plan. Priority 1, identify the source. People, figure out who's talking, the old thing that we keep coming back to. People don't cite statistics for no reason. They cite them to support allegations. They cite them to sell laundry soap. They cite them to shape for public policy. And this goes back, of course, to the prime directive, know who's talking. Knowing what specific point the statistic is being used to support, you know just where to look to see what's being overlooked or ignored. You can also very easily catch those who try to hijack what Huff calls an okay name with this question. Statements like several studies at prestigious universities have shown that X are almost without fail just fabrications. That's easy enough. But you may also get a study at MIT last year revealed that Y, and that'll take a little bit more digging. But the bottom line is, if you can't identify the source, assume the source is the person who's trying to sell you something, and that they either made it up or distorted it to the point of unrecognizability, and don't want you to check it up because then their argument will fall to the floor. I'm going to try not to sneeze because it's just awkward when you're mic'd up. But, Number 2, if it's a shocking statistic, don't just say, wow, how did I miss that, and share it on your social networks. This is kind of a silly thing to say to people your age. This is far more of a sin of your parents and people my age. To like it, like, oh wow, look at that. The New York Times is reporting that Mitch McConnell skipped on a murder rap in 1963 or something like that. How did I miss that? I remember 1963. I was in the third grade. Not me. I mean, I wasn't in the third grade. And then share it on Facebook or, you know, the Oldies Network or whatever their thing is. But mostly, younger people don't typically fall for that sort of thing as much as they did even 5 years ago. In the amount of time I've been teaching this class, I have seen bullshit detection on the part of college students like double and then double again in terms of effectiveness. So I mean, we get wise is the way it comes down to. Right? Figure out how the story managed to sneak up on you, though. I mean, how on earth did poverty get so bad that 1 out of every 4 Americans is going hungry? And you didn't know about it until you saw an ad. How is it possible that 25% of Americans don't know what the solar system looks like and think that the sun revolves around the Earth? I'll unpack that one a little bit later, but it's a kind of a funny little swindle. And spoiler alert, 25% of Americans don't think that. Don't just accept it. Figure out how it snuck up on you. Maybe you didn't know that all those hungry people live in like Appalachia or Indian reservations, and, you know, that's how it snuck up on you. But no, that's not it, because, of course, the reason it snuck up on you is because somebody decided to redefine struggles with hunger to include everybody who had to settle for something that they would rather not eat for dinner because it was all that was in the cupboard, which is bad enough, but not the same. And now you know. This one, by the way, 43% of pilots admit to falling asleep during flight. If it's true, I'm not actually sure that it's true, but pilots work in teams, and sometimes members of the team sleep because that's how you stay fresh if you're needed. And yeah. Let's see. At the same time, though, guard against the backlash fallacy. This is kind of important. Just because the people calling your attention to hunger issues are liars doesn't mean there are no hunger issues. Just because women don't really earn 59 cents on every man's dollar does not mean that they now earn 100%. They don't. But Christina Hoff Sommers here on the Daily Beast several years ago would for some reason like you to think that they do. Just because Hitler got 33% of the vote doesn't mean that the process by which he acquired power was not a democratic one. It was. Just because there's no proof that an abandoned ship full of diseased rats is floating toward Britain doesn't mean that there isn't one. There isn't. But that didn't. Yeah. So keep your brain switched on when you're busting a bullshitter, because sometimes the would-be bullshit busters get overexcited and make noob mistakes, and sometimes the bullshitters go meta in their quest for cheap talking points. I will have more to say about Christina Hoff Sommers a little later. Her remarkable claim that the pay gap doesn't exist when we talk about logical fallacies. It's a false dichotomy argument. Basically, she says, well, I can prove that women make more than 59 cents on every man's dollar, to quote the old song. Therefore, women make 100 cents on every man's dollar. And we're not there yet. I mean, I think most people agree that we need to be, because why should you have to pay a penalty tax for being female? But you know, to claim that we're there already, yay, let's declare, yeah, no. Anyway, but it's a great example of that fallacy, and you'll see that deployed from time to time. I will say this other thing too. Remember how people who want to believe bullshit will sometimes pay well to certify that it's real? Dudes who want to think that there's no pay gap would really like to be able to point to a quote-unquote actual feminist who says it's a myth. And I've actually seen dudes like that point to this article to make that claim, and refer to Susanna Hoff Sommers as an actual feminist. Well, I mean, anybody can be a feminist if they want to. They can self-identify, right? Just like I don't get to tell you whether or not you are a Christian or a Muslim, or you're not a Christian because you're a Mormon, or something like that. Anybody who wants to call themselves anything they want to call themselves can call themselves that thing. And Summers does self-identify as a feminist. But it does mean that this claim, while bullshit, is guaranteed almost to resonate with a considerable audience of wishful thinking men. Benford's law is the one last thing that I want to share with you about statistics, and it's kind of a wonky thing. But it is a thing to remember if you ever expect that or suspect that someone is giving you a whole lot of fake numbers. It's kind of a quick and dirty check to see. Go through the numbers and count the number of numbers that start with the digit 1. Then count the numbers that start with the digit 2. Then count the ones that start with 8 and the ones that start with 9. And you should see, if they're real, that there are at least twice as many 1s and 2s as 8s and 9s. In fact, it shouldn't be even close. And there should be noticeably more 1s than 2s. But Benford's law, it's explained by a fairly dense algorithm that I don't really understand, but the gist of it can be observed by just taking like several different multi-digit numbers and counting all the numbers leading up to them. So like, let's take the number 20. If you take all of the numbers that go into the number 20, you will have 11 1s, 2 2s, and 1 of everything else. I mean, that the number starts out with, right? So lots more 1s and more 2s, and then 1 of everything else. And if you take a set of all the numbers that add up to 40, you get 11 1s, 11 2s, 11 3s, 2 4s, and 1 of everything else. So you can kind of see the way these are stacking up, that until you get to 99, there's more 1s than anything else, there's more 2s than anything else, there's more 3s than anything else larger. At 99, all the numbers are equal for the first and only time until you get to 999. So if you take a randomly generated number from each of those sets, the 20 set, the 40 set, the 60 set, the 80 set, and the 99 set, there'll be a lot more 1s and 2s than any other number. That's why Benford's law works. In any case, you don't have to fully understand it to use it. If in a situation where you suspect you're being BS'd with a numerical table, or if somebody sends you what's supposed to be sales figures from a business that you've invested in or something like that, or partnered with somebody on, and you throw Benford's law at it and it fails, you're being swindled. You can take it to the bank, because this is a statistical pattern that's provable. This isn't a red flag. This is an indictment. If somebody gives you numbers that violate Benford's law, they're cheating you. Here's some examples of what naturally, fake numbers tend to look like non-naturally occurring. You can kind of see there. Benford's law would indicate that the dark blue bars would be followed, and you can see it follows just a kind of a straight power curve. The green ones are actual true tax data from actual true non-cheating tax forms. They follow Benford's law very nicely. Fraudulent data from fraudulent tax forms follows that total random weird dark brick colored one. And random guess data follows that beige thing there. There's a sort of an instinctive, I think there may be a little bit of an instinctive sense that 9s aren't as common as starting digits. So you see it tapers off a bit, but not as fast. This is an analysis of China's published quarterly gross domestic product from the end of 2012, which is kind of funny. They analyzed the first digits, and then they looked good, but then they analyzed the second digits, and they were flat. And the conclusion that the mathematicians came to was that the numbers were all rounded up. I'm telling you, statistics is an interesting thing. I wish that I had taken a statistics class when I was an undergraduate. And if you haven't, you totally should, even if you think you're not a math person, because the numbers can tell you a lot of things. Now, let's see. Where are we at? We're at 30 minutes. I think that can probably... Well, let's go ahead and no, I'm going to save the big data. We'll talk about big data when we get together on whatever that day. Wednesday. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Okay, guys, have a great weekend. Enjoy the time off, and I will see you then. I always say that, and then I'm like fumbling around Okay, stop recording. Okay, bye guys.